I remember 21 years ago, Chani and I were living at the time in Perth. We had the privilege of being able to host Rabbi Shmuley, who came to visit our community. I don't know if he remembers it. Unfortunately, Debbie wasn't with us at the time. That's why he was such a mess on that trip. I can tell you that I've never yet spent time with an individual of such high energy and achieves so much all within one day. I felt like I needed a holiday just watching the guy operate. It was such an insight and an opening into what can be done if you really want to get things done. Rabbi Shmuley today is certainly considered as one of the greatest defenders of the state of Israel. He's a household name when it comes to expert advice on relationships. And Rabbi Shmuley, I believe, has authored over 30 books. Have you read 30 books in your life? So we're truly privileged to have Debbie and Shmuley with us today. Of course, the relationship with Debbie's family goes back to our days when we were privileged to have Rabbi Yossi and Chana Rezel work here with us at the shul. Today they're doing an outstanding job at Merubah. I want to welcome their parents who are here today to have a little bit of nachas from the son-in-law, in case you don't get enough of it. Rabbi Shmuley's on a tight schedule, as when you get home, you're going to be seeing more of him because he's going to be in Q&A. Okay. So even though this watch is it's running a little bit late, we're actually 6 minutes behind that. But unfortunately, Rabbi's got to be out of here by 8 o'clock. And so, without any further ado, the great star, or the rabbis to the star, Rabbi Shmuley.
I'm guessing that our audience is sufficiently intimate that everyone can hear me without a microphone. Is that correct? Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to return to Central Synagogue. I thank my very dear friend and colleague, your rabbi, who I've called Levi affectionately for many decades. I thank him for his warm introduction. I started coming to this shul when I was a student of 19 years old. I am now 27, so that's I'm trying to do this count. I was never good at math. I'm now 52, so you do the math. I started coming here. Rabbi Nissen Shulman was the rabbi, and by the strangest coincidence, he and I followed each other around the world, because he was my rabbi at Sharei Tefillah in Los Angeles until I was the age of 8, little boy of 8. He was my rabbi across the street from my house. Then I came here to Sydney, Australia, and he was the rabbi of Central Synagogue. Then I became the rabbi at Oxford University for 11 years, and he was the rabbi of the St. John's Wood Synagogue. So I used to say to Rabbi Shmuley, are you following me? Are you stalking me? Or am I stalking you? But this shul has grown by leaps and bounds under Rabbi Wolf, and it's become a renowned synagogue. I know that you were all honored to host the Prime Minister of Israel not long ago, and so many other dignitaries. And I thank you for coming out on a Monday night to hear me. Just a couple of quick hellos. I want to welcome my in-laws, Dr. Sam and Eva Friedman. I also want to acknowledge the presence of my wife Debbie, their second daughter, who has accompanied me from the United States. Very nice to be here. Sometimes I have to come here without my wife. It's much nicer to be here with my wife, even though it's not much nicer for her to be here with me. But relationships can be one way sometimes, right? No one's laughing. Okay, good. Everyone's saying, yeah, I understand that. I get that. I also want to welcome my brother-in-law, the Rabbi of Merubra, Rabbi Yossi Friedman, and his wife, the Rebbetzin of Merubra, Chana Rezel Friedman, who served here as the assistant rabbi for a few years. And I finally want to welcome my very good friends, Rodney and Lindy Adler. It's nice to see both of you here, with some members of the family. And I have so many other friends. You'll forgive me for not pontificating in any more lengthy introductions, because as Levi said, there is a show Q&A, and I'm going to be on tonight. I actually want to talk a little bit about that, because although tonight's subject, the producers tell me, is going to begin with the conviction of Cardinal George Pell, which has traumatized this country. I arrived the morning after the conviction was announced. We knew about it in the United States, I think, before even all of you know about it, because there was a media blackout, but not for the United States. So that will be the subject of Q&A. But my very dear friend Robert Weil, where is Robert? Okay. My very dear friend Robert Weil, tsunami of anti-Semitism coming from? And is Israel the only haven for us? And do diaspora Jewry stand a chance? So I want to discuss it in the context of that episode that you sent me, which is probably 6 months old. I was kind of astonished. The United States is a country where 70% of the population support Israel, and about 30% are more pro-Palestinian. When I lived in the UK, it's precisely the opposite. About 70% are anti-Israel. The Labour Party would probably be 80 or 90% today. Jeremy Corbyn does not seem to be favorably disposed to either Israel or Jews. The Conservative Party probably more so, and I'm well aware of the fact that a former Conservative Prime Minister spoke for the JIA just last week here in Sydney. But I didn't know where Australia is on the question of Israel, and that show was remarkable. Because the distortions and the half-truths that were told without a proper rejoinder were astonishing. The conversation was about Gaza. I was and it says, it's incredible, big, beautiful American crested eagle, and it says, Embassy of the United States, Jerusalem, Israel. I was there, and as I was sitting at the opening of the embassy, we saw the violence. It was popping on our phones. We saw the violence that was taking place on the Gaza border. And about 60 people died that day. And this Q&A was all about the violence on the Gaza border. And Israel was accused of a mass slaughter of Palestinians. And there was a woman who, she said she's a devout Muslim. I celebrate the Islamic faith. I want to see a very successful, peaceful, passionate Islamic faith. I think that we Jews have a great deal to learn from our Muslim brothers and sisters, particularly in how they publicly affirm their religion without inhibition. We Jews, I travel all around Europe. I've just completed a manuscript for another book. And don't be impressed with Levi saying I've written 30 books. Many have sold 30 copies. But I just completed another book called Holocaust Holiday. One family's descent into genocide memory hell. And it tells the story how over 2 summers, I took most of my children to the killing fields of Europe, to Majdanek and Sobibor, and Mauthausen, and Sachsenhausen, and Gross-Rosen, and of course, Auschwitz and Birkenau. And the impact on a family, as you tell this story through living the events, as you walk through the only graves, for example, of the Holocaust that are in the Lodz ghetto, where they actually buried 40,000 people, and the IDF had a program to name them, and the debates I had with my children, and how my 20-year-old daughter, Rachalea, decides in Budapest that she's leaving the trip, and why did I show her a dead Israel? Jews no longer wear yarmulkes. That's the degree of discomfort faced by the Jewish community in Europe. And when I arrived, we go to the Orsay Museum. The Orsay Museum is the greatest Impressionist museum in the world. In the world. Nothing compares. It's the second most famous museum in all of Paris after the Louvre, but for modern art, it's the most famous in the world. And my wife is wearing a Magen David. And the woman selling her the ticket says to her, please take it off. Not because I don't like Israel, I do, and I'm not Jewish, but because I don't want you to be injured or harmed in our museum. True story. Or arriving in Berlin with the entire family, and an Israeli security guard who's there with an American group to protect them walks over to me and says to me, you are doing your children a disservice by wearing a yarmulke, take it off. Or walking through the streets of Marseille on the night that France won the quarterfinal of the World Cup. They would go on 2 weeks later to win the entire World Cup. And as we're walking along the beautiful promenade where 80 people were mowed down with a truck about 2 years ago, as you recall, a Jewish woman named Dahan, she told me her name, from Paris, who's on vacation, runs over and pleads with us and begs us. She was almost crying. Said, I'm begging you, take off your kippot. No, we didn't. So I know where Europe stands. I know where England stands. I didn't know where Australia stood, and then I watched this Q&A. And as I said, the distortions, the lies. That we're told, this woman says that she's a proud Muslim. I salute her. What does Islam have to do with hating Jews? For my sons, our youngest son was just bar mitzvahed in Israel. My friend Roseanne Barr joined us on the trip, so a lot of people happened to read about the trip, for those of you that followed it. Dana White, the chief Pentagon spokesperson, an African-American woman, who just left as a very young woman, as the chief spokesman for the entire United States military worldwide. She joined us on the trip. She's a devout evangelical Christian. On the way there, we went through Spain. I wanted to show my children an example of the Iberian Peninsula, where there was a golden age. The Muslims never had crusades where they just ransacked entire communities, killing tens of thousands, as we saw the first crusade called by Pope Urban in the year 1098, or when the Christians actually conquered Jerusalem and murdered every last Jew. And then Sultan Salah al-Din, Saladin, to whom Maimonides served as personal physician, he invited the Jews back. His doctor, who treated him and his family, was the greatest rabbi that ever lived. Islam need not mean that you hate Judaism, and I didn't understand this woman's hostility in Q&A, and it was just shocking. And the argument that she made, that Israel is out to massacre the Palestinian people. And you saw it on the opening day of the embassy, because 60 were murdered. I should say killed, because murdered means in cold blood. She did not mention that Hamas later took responsibility for 52 of them, saying they were Hamas operatives. She did not mention that Hamas has a genocidal charter calling for the murder of every Jew on earth, including in Bodnai, Sydney, Australia, and every other place. She did not mention that Hamas terrorizes the Palestinian population and aids and abets honor killings of innocent Palestinian girls whose only crime is to have a boyfriend at the age of 16 or 17 and encourages their brothers to murder them. The best-known Jewish philanthropists in the world are Sheldon and Miriam Adelson of Las Vegas Sands Corporation. They're the biggest contributors to Birthright. They're a little bit controversial because they're very and she was subject to an honor killing, and she ran to a refuge for women that was paid for under American pressure to shelter women in distress. She later had to escape. They eloped, got married. The New York Times wrote the story. Miriam Adelson said to me, "This woman is in danger. We should help her." And through the offices of President Paul Kagame of Rwanda, and you should all be aware that in 1 month we will commemorate the 25th anniversary of the Rwandan genocide. For the 20th anniversary, I had the great honor of being the keynote speaker at Amahoro National Stadium in Kigali for the 20th anniversary of the Rwandan genocide. And I called up President Kagame's offices and I said, you know, like the Jews, what it's like to experience a genocide. This woman's going to be murdered. And President Kagame gave them a visa and we saved her life. And it was funded by the Adelsons. And they're known as the most right-wing supporters of Israel. They saved this woman's life. And now they have relocated to the United States. There need not be any conflict between Islam and Judaism. But this woman was saying things, and I said to myself, God Almighty, does this stuff happen in Australia all the time? I know it happens in England because I live there. When the Lubavitcher Rebbe sent me to Oxford in 1988, and my wife and I just commemorated the 30th anniversary of our being sent as the Rebbe's emissaries to Oxford, I wanted to teach people about Judaism and the Parsha of the week and have Shabbos dinners. I didn't expect, nor did I feel the need until I got there to host 6 Israeli prime ministers, which we would later do. Netanyahu and Shamir and Peres, Olmert, I could go on, just to defend Israel. We were locked in a war for Israel. I didn't expect that. I would much 40% who consider themselves Catholics are probably lapsed for the most part. Nevertheless, this was a man of global stature. This was one of the most famous senior Australians in the world, and the country's traumatized. He's the most senior prelate, cleric ever to be convicted of a crime like this, and the country is rightly traumatized. To those who believe he's innocent, guilty, it makes no difference. It's a traumatic event, and it deserves to be discussed. So I don't know if Israel's going to come up, but if I were on that show, what I would have said to this fine young Muslim woman, to whom I will accord the benefit of the doubt that she was saying this because she cared about the Palestinians as opposed to saying it because she hated Israel, I would have said to her, you know, in 1963, President John F. Kennedy was caught in the same debate as to which system was correct, communism or capitalism. And each one brought their arguments. And I can go on Q&A and argue for Israel, and this woman can come back and argue for her side, and the debates will go on forever. I've debated the Israel opponents and the Israel haters. I've debated some of them who are very rational in places like the Oxford Union. I've debated the people who are irrational. And these debates will go on forever. So John F. Kennedy came with an almost irrefutable argument. 3 months before he was assassinated, he went to the Berlin Wall and he said, I know that Khrushchev says that communism is about an equal distribution of economic resources. I'm aware century. What did he say? What did he say? Close. That was Reagan about 20 years later, but very close. It is about a wall. You're almost there. What did he say? He said, if Khrushchev is right, that their system is better, and we Americans suck, then why do you have to build a wall to keep your people in? Case closed. Ultimately, people vote with their feet. If communism is so wonderful, why do you need to cage them in? And if I was on this show, I would have said to this woman, let's say you're right. Israel's horrible. Genocidal. By the way, while she was speaking, you know, all the tweets go up, and there was a tweet that said, it's so sad when the oppressed become the oppressor. You're right. Israel's a Gestapo, Nazi-like state. We've heard this all. The oppressed have become the oppressors in Israel. what if 6 million Jews, and that's a very prescient number, 6 million Jews that live in Israel say, we've had enough. Rockets and demonization and resolutions by the UN. We're moving to Australia. We're moving to Florida. We're moving to New York. Jews live very comfortably in many Western countries. The Israel experiment. Council, anyone know? Not one. Not one. 60 against Israel in the same time frame. 60. 500,000 dead Arabs. Innocent Muslim children foaming at the mouth from mustard and sarin gas, and not one UN resolution. Blocked by Syria, blocked by China. Sorry, blocked by Russia, blocked by China. Let's say Israel disappears, God forbid, in a peaceful way. What do you get? Another Egypt? Sisi's an ally of Israel. God bless him, thank you. But he's also a dictator. And the reason we now accept his dictatorship is we saw that an election in Egypt led to the Muslim Brotherhood and Mohammed Morsi. Israel disappears, God forbid. What now? Hamas. Israel to withdraw. All BDS. As the West, have you ever heard of a giant region being the name the West Bank of a river? There is no California, Arizona. It's all the West Mississippi. This language is used to de-Judaize the area. No one argues that Saudi Arabia is part of the Arabian Peninsula, and Arabs live there. God bless them. They don't want to call it Judea and Samaria because then there would be no dispute. We don't believe that any Jews should live in Judea. We think that Judea should be de-Judaized. So language becomes very important. So what happens if Israel withdraws from the West Bank? We know what happens. That's why Mahmoud Abbas has not gone to elections. Mahmoud Abbas was elected to a 4-year term. He's in the 15th year of his 4-year term. And the reason why doesn't anyone complain that he's become a dictator? Because if he goes to elections, Hamas wins like they won in Gaza. And we know what Hamas is. They're not just an international terrorist organization that has fired 80,000 rockets at Israel, that puts tires around gay Palestinian men or women and burns them alive. Hamas is a bloodthirsty, child-sacrificing death cult. They use Palestinian children to die on the altar of bad press for Israel. That's what those 60 people were the day that America's embassy moved. I would have said to this woman, let's say you're right, let's not even argue. Israel disappears, God forbid. Do you know how bad it would get? And it's easy to prove. Kennedy's argument. In 1993, when Israel made a deal, Yitzhak Rabin, with Yasser Arafat, and made one of the most consequential self-inflicted wounds of any nation, sadly, in the history of the world. When Israel armed 40,000 Palestinian Authority soldiers, terminals, they went to war, that 2 wars that are continuing till today, when 3,000 died in one day. When Rabin made this deal with Arafat, you would have expected that Israel's 1.5 million Muslim citizens. Israel has as many Muslim citizens as all of Great Britain. We always speak about how Europe has a growing Muslim population and how much they influence elections. Israel has the same number of Muslim citizens as Great Britain. The difference is Israel has 7 million citizens and Britain has 70 million citizens. So you would have expected that this tyrannical, brutal, Jewish, genocidal, Gestapo-like, Nazi-like country, they would have been thrilled to leave and go and live under Yasser Arafat, which is the choice that was presented to them. Do you know how many went? 4,000. And the 4,000 that went because they wanted to be reunited with family. So no one went. Almost no one went. That's a desecration of the memory of 6 million Jews to call Gaza a concentration camp. And the more we allow language like that to infiltrate the culture, the more we not only denigrate the Holocaust, but the more we implicate ourselves in these fraudulent charges that we are Nazis. But she said it on Q&A, no one challenged her. She failed to mention that Hamas has received more international aid per capita than any political entity in the history of the world, something like triple what the Europeans got in the Marshall Plan in the wake of the Second World War. And what did they do with it? What did they do with it? They built tunnels to murder Jewish children. They bought rockets to terrorize Israeli civilian population centers. And all of this was said on a national TV show here in Australia with almost no one to respond. Now, how does that happen? How does that happen? You know what, my friends? Given the limited time we have, I could speak about the causes of this tsunami of anti-Semitism. Is it because there's some genetic predisposition among our non-Jewish brothers and sisters to hate us? That's certainly what Israel's acting foreign minister, Yisrael Katz, said about Poland 2 Sundays ago in one of the stupidest comments ever made by an Israeli official. How embarrassing. Poland had just hosted a conference against Iran jointly with the United States. I attended that conference. Vice President Pence was there, and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was there, and Jared Kushner was there, and Jason Greenblatt was there. And it was co-convened by the Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki. The limitations of the treaty would allow Iran to build bombs after 10 years, an unlimited number. President Obama himself acknowledged that. Okay, you still think it's the best you can do? At the very least, Mr. President, just condemn Iran for saying you're going to kill all the Jews. Just once. Just say it. Say it's unacceptable. And it wasn't said even once. And I ask you, you're Australians. You consider the United States an ally, which it is. If Iran had said, we want to sign this deal, we want the $150 billion, it's our money, unfrozen, you have to unfreeze the assets, but we're just going to kill all the Australians. We're going to annihilate Australia. Do you think the United States would have given $1 to Iran? But it's okay to say it about the Jews. media and banking. What a joke. We couldn't even stop the United States from giving $150 billion to a country that threatened our annihilation. So then the Israeli foreign minister says that all Poles are anti-Semites. That was dumb. That was pretty dumb. Jews, thank God, are smart. That was dumb. So I could say the causes of anti-Semitism, maybe it's genetic. Talmud says that Esau hates Yaakov genetically. But I don't believe that. I've spent my life among non-Jews. I've spent my life teaching, listening to non-Jews. Today, Israel's best friends are not the Jewish community in the U.S., it's the Christian evangelical community. President Trump, to the extent that he moved the embassy for any political constituency, and I thank him for moving the embassy of his own volition, it was it says because anti-Semitism started at Mount Sinai. When you are given a moral code and you begin to preach it to the world, when you become the conscience of the world, you're hated. And they're going to try to kill you. No one wants to hear, don't steal, don't commit. No one wants to be restrained by any code of ethics. People don't want to be limited in that way, and they don't want to be preached to. But I want to take a different approach. Not why there is anti-Semitism. I want to ask why we allow it. Why do we allow it? How is this happening? The desecration of tombs, the demonization of Israel, boycotts against Israel. These Australian guys, like, they're born with 12 packs. Now, we rabbis, we don't have that. We have a mono pack. Because we rabbis, we don't believe in division, disunity. We believe e pluribus unum, as we Americans would say. From the many, there shall be one. So the first thing we Jews have failed at is sports. Actually, that's no longer true. Julian Edelman just was the MVP at the Super Bowl. That was amazing. Jewish guy, MVP at the Super Bowl. I actually played high school football. Never traditionally excelled at sports, although that's changing. Israel's won 1 or 2 gold medals in the Olympics. But the real thing we've always been terrible at, terrible, is PR. We suck at PR. We're pretty good at education, thank God. We're decent at finance. We're okay in business. We suck at PR. There's one problem. If your biblical mandate is to be a light unto the nations, and you're supposed to propagate such an important message, if you don't know how to communicate, you're really screwed. Because now people are gonna, once you start telling the world, don't kill, don't steal, there's only one God, you shouldn't, like, and he kind of agreed with that. A very controversial conversation. I bring it up because the mistake that Cardinal Pell made in that conversation, he said the really intellectual people were the people who built great empires. He said, I think the Chaldeans and the Egyptians. That's ridiculous. The greatest intellectuals are people of ideas. And the Jews have given the world the most important ideas. And the single most important idea? That no man is God. That no one is a deity, that everyone is fallible and everyone's imperfect, and you could be a cardinal and be accused of pretty serious stuff, and that's kind of sad, but rabbis are imperfect, and priests are imperfect, and we're all imperfect. And invoking your title ain't gonna cut it, because we're just a collection of men and women accusation. No one's gonna believe it. We're not even gonna respond, because no one's gonna believe it. Do you know how many Jews died because we didn't respond? Because we didn't aggressively respond and say, how flippin' dare you? We gave the world the idea of God. The Romans persecuted and brutalized us and killed Jesus. Pontius Pilate, who ordered his death, killed 250,000 other Jews by crucifixion. How dare you? over the past few weeks in co-hosting this conference that was amazing about sanctioning Iran, mobilizing even the Arab nations to stop Iranian aggression. But Poland has some serious anti-Semitic offenses for which they are accountable. And one of them was the blood libel in 1946 in the city of Kielce. I went to the place where it happened. I went there and the museum was closed already. It was 10:30 at night. We were driving from Warsaw to Krakow. And I knocked on the door, and they thought that the Jews had taken him for their matzahs. The child reappeared 2 days later, but 46 Jews paid. So the blood libel exists in modern times, let alone in many Arab lands, how they still repeat the blood libel. But we weren't even going to respond to that. Then they came along and said, and then you Jews poison the wells of Europe. And we said, poison the wells of Europe? We're drinking the same water. There aren't enough Jews to poison all the wells of Europe. But they said the bubonic plague, the Black Death, was because of you Jews. And again, we said no one's going to believe it, so we didn't respond. So when a woman said on Q&A that the Jews are running the world's largest concentration camp and all of Australia heard it, we didn't respond saying, it's such an absurdity that no one is going to believe it. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, the first Muslim woman to wear the Muslim headdress in Congress, and I celebrate her for that. I love that she publicly affirms her faith. I would love to see more Jews wear yarmulkes. I would love to see more women wear Magen Davids. I celebrate her affirmation of faith. But what does that have to do with writing a tweet that Jews buy off their politicians with money, with Benjamins, $100 bills? Disgusting. But boy, did she pay a price. The American Jewish community was outraged, and we pressured the Democratic leadership, like Nancy Pelosi, to condemn it, and it was condemned. Now, that didn't stop her. She said, I think yesterday or the day before, and by the way, when I'm in Australia, I lose total track of time. I don't know if my children now exist in a warped space-time dimension in some other play. I can never figure it out. Is it like last week in America right now? Is it And it was amazing to be there. I walked into Auschwitz with the chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi David Lau, and he was holding a Torah. But then I went myself. I took the train. There's a high-speed train linking Warsaw and Krakow. It's a 5-hour drive, 2.5-hour train ride. Got to Warsaw, 3 feet of snow, and I'm looking for BLI 18. I needed to feel the closeness, the proximity of Mordechai Nalevich. I wanted to know where he died with his 700 fighters. We don't know exactly, but about the 8th of May, 1943, 3 weeks after launching the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. How they refused to be captured, like the defenders of Masada, they blew themselves up. But they had killed a lot of SS monsters. You can't call these people soldiers, they were just murderers. And then they killed themselves. And I couldn't find the marker, I couldn't find the monument, and I'm digging in the snow. Australia have chipped in to send me on a book tour for my new book with Pamela Anderson to Iraq and Afghanistan. And they bought me this beautiful T-shirt. It's really nice. It says, "I love Bibi," and it has a Magen David on it. Big. It's very nice. I look forward to wearing it on the book tour. And I just want to thank all the rabbis for supporting the message of this book. But on a serious note, I'd much rather write books on it. I'm a child of divorce. I think that with all the macrocosmic problems we face, genocide, mass murder, starvation, global diplomatic tensions, there's also the microcosmic problems. Divorce, that we should be compared to the people who perpetrated such a horror. And accusing Jews of being Nazis is outside of civilized discourse. And public broadcasters need to be told that. I don't believe in suppressing free speech. I'm a free speech absolutist. Let them say it. But our response has got to be ferocious. If any person went to the black community in the United States and said, the oppressed have become the oppressors, the black community absorbed so much hatred, slavery, Jim Crow, discrimination, that you're now brutalizing white people, there would be outrage. And they would say, you are taking a historical abomination, America's greatest abomination, slavery. And now not only are you minimizing its evil, you are now accusing that majestic democracy, that beacon of life and human rights in this sea of tyranny. I know that its protection and its future is important not only for the 6 million Jews who live there, but for the dignity of each and every one of us as well. Don't think for one moment that when a woman says that Israel's running a concentration camp, that she is not also pointing a finger at the Australian Jews who allow it and send money there and don't object. It's a personal allegation. It's a personal accusation. So you're in the fight whether you like it or not. We are one people. We are one nation. We will never be cowed. We will never be defeated. We are forever. Thank you very much.